And good morning. Yes, it is morning. It is a Sunday morning, and I'm about to make some delicious, what I call comfort food. I'm going to be making an Italian beef stew, and I don't think I've even made a Portuguese one on my channel, but I decided to do an Italian one because it was a recipe I tried a few years back. It's obviously endlessly modifiable. You can pretty much use anything you have in your pantry, anything you have in your freezer. I'm going to be talking about the perfect way to do it. So if I had every fresh veggie that I wanted in the house, it'd be all fresh. Unfortunately, I had the meat and I had a couple of other fresh things, but I didn't have everything. So therefore, I'm going to modify and I'm going to use some frozen veggies as well as some of the fresh veggies. And I'm going to be using some other ingredients, and most of it you must have in your house. I'll say one thing. Biggest difference between this beef stew, this Italian style beef stew, and the Portuguese one or some other beef stews that we may be used to, is that this beef stew has no potatoes. And the reason it doesn't is because I guess the Italians prefer to use the meat and vegetables with the delicious red wine based sauce over either pasta or egg noodles, over polenta, or even over, I guess you could serve it over mashed potatoes, make it like almost like an Irish base, I'm going to serve it over mashed potatoes, but instead of showing you, how to make the base, because I think everyone has their favorite. You can use fresh egg noodles, dry egg noodles. You can use fresh, nice whole mashed potatoes, or you could just eat this plain. Maybe with some toasted bread and some crostini or something like that. Anyway, I'm going to show you how to make this, and I'm going to show you everything you need, and you'll be shocked. It's very, very easy and so delicious. Typically, this is something that I think about when I think about the fall or the winter, because it's such a warm, cozy, satisfying meal. But it's the middle of summer, and I'm wanting my beef stew. So here's how it goes. Okay, so we're back, and I'm going to tell you everything you need. First, I have one large onion that I've already diced. I also have about 3 stalks of celery, again, already diced. And I have about, this looks like it's about 2.5 or just under 3 pounds of stewed meat. Sometimes I like to buy like the big slobby, big huge package of like a chuck roast. Or just a big cheap roast cut of meat and then cut it and cube it myself to make the stew meat. But today it was just easier. I had this in the house. I was planning on making beef stew probably a week or 2 ago, so it was in the freezer. But I am going to use this stew meat as the meat base. Red wine, I have one that's been open that I've had some from, and then I have another one ready to go. You will need some stock, obviously. Beef stock, if you have it. Homemade beef stock would be great. Bone broth would be great. But all I had in the house was chicken, which is absolutely fine, or the beef bouillon, or better than beef. So if you're going to use the bouillon with the better than beef, obviously you use water as your base and you make your stock with it. Or you can just go ahead and use a chicken or a veggie. Trust me, if you have the meat and if you have the veggies, the base won't really matter that much. Of course, you can choose to use the kind with sodium or low sodium. I kind of like the low sodium options because then you can just adjust the salt level to taste. Ordinarily, I would use fresh mushrooms, but again, don't have fresh mushrooms at home. Don't know why, but I seem to have lots of canned mushrooms. I'm throwing those in there. I really like using fresh carrots. However, didn't have any fresh carrots, or rather I did, but they didn't look that fresh. So I am going to go with a standard frozen peas, carrots, corn, and put those into my stew. I do have a few seasonings that you'll need though. You're going to need some Italian seasoning, and obviously some salt and some black ground pepper. For those of you that like a little bit more pepper, when you do your final tasting toward the end, if you need to adjust either the pepper level or the kind of pepper that you like, that's the best time to do it. And either fresh or dried rosemary. And again, kind of an impromptu kind of thing today, so I'm using my dried rosemary. That is pretty much it. And you'll be shocked. It's so easy to make. You start on top of the stove and then it goes into the oven. And it's really about time and patience to make this beautiful, beautiful Italian beef stew. All right, so here we are at the stove. You'll see that I have one of those Dutch oven type of pans, it's because I'm going to start this on top of the stove, but end this in the oven. So you want to make sure that you use a pan that can go easily from stovetop to oven. And this is certainly one of those Dutch oven type. Lodge makes them, Le Creuset makes them. I get them from Amazon, not too bad at all. So I'm going to put the flame up to around medium, and I am adding about 3 or 4 tablespoons of olive oil, any kind of olive oil. And what I'm going to do now is add the onion and add the celery to this oil. You don't need to worry about having to add the onions first because this is going to cook for so long. It's actually going to go in the oven for quite a bit. This is going to cook, simmer, reduce down, and ultimately become very, very tender. So you want to put these veggies in here with the oil, and I don't think I'll need any more oil than I've used, and cook them down for about 5 or 6 minutes. If I were using fresh carrots and fresh mushrooms, right after the celery and the onion goes in, I would put in the carrots at that point, and again, cook the carrots with the other fresh veggies. But because I'm going to go with frozen, I'm going to put those all in, including the, I know, sacrilegious, canned mushrooms. The mushrooms would go after the carrots if I were using all fresh ingredients. And I'm just going to let these cook down, sweat these out, and I'll show you what we do when they're done, or at least when they're ready for the next step. Okay, this is getting very close. Now, I didn't mention it before, but if you like garlic, you can certainly add garlic, and this would be when you'd add your chopped or minced garlic. I, being that of the let's not be a hero, especially since I like to cook a lot on the weekends and I'm very busy during the week, I'm going with the minced, very finely. I'm adding 3 teaspoons. Sometimes I add the garlic, sometimes I don't. I do like the taste of garlic, and I've never heard of anything that was ruined by garlic, so give it a try if you like garlic. I think it'll just enhance the entire dish. I'm going to mix the garlic into the celery and into the onion. It's looking nice. This is when you should check to see, make sure everything is not sticking. The inside of these Dutch ovens are lined with a ceramic, like a ceramic base, so things don't stick. But you can tell when you might need to add a little more olive oil. In this case, I'm looking okay. And you don't have to get it all down. And by all down, you don't have to cook it down at all. As soon as you start to see the onion take on that softened look, maybe starting to get a little translucent on the ends, and the celery starts to become very bright green, it's pretty good. Okay, I'm not going to wait too much longer because there's really no need. It's really not a question of getting everything cooked, at least not right now. What I'm going to do now is add my stew meat. As I said, I bought the stew meat already cubed, already ready to go. I'm adding about 2.5 pounds. But the meat doesn't have to be something that you prepackaged purchase as a stew meat. You could easily get a chuck roast or buy any other cut of meat, chop it down yourself. If you do that, if you do buy the bigger hunks of meat, what I like to do with those is I like to cut it into bigger chunks and sear it. And usually I would be searing the meat with some salt and some black pepper in another big skillet right while I'm doing this, and then transferring it over or cutting the meat or cubing the meat after I sear it and then putting it in. But again, no need to be a hero. It's about the end result, and the end result is going to be delicious. So here I go. I'm going to be adding my stew meat to this right now. Just put it right in. Putting it right in, and then quickly moving it to a medium low, giving it the old swish around the inside of the pan so that the onions. And now is when I'll add my first couple of dashes of salt. I haven't added any seasonings to any of this yet, so don't be shy with the salt at this point. 3 pinches is what I'm adding right now. Maybe 3.5. Okay. You want to add a little salt before you add any other wet ingredients for sure. If you are choosing to use a beef stock that you've made yourself, that's already seasoned, you don't need to add as much salt. If you're adding a stock made from a Better Than Beef or a stock that you have purchased, collagen or any other stock that's already salted, you'll use less as well. Or if you've gone low sodium, then go ahead and just wait till we get to the end. I'm also going to add right now some cracked black pepper, which I left on the island, but I have here ready to go. So here's the cracked black pepper. I will adjust the seasonings at the end because I do like things a little zingy, a little spicy, and sometimes at the very end of a dish, I like to brighten things up with a different kind of pepper, or maybe a little bit of hot sauce or something, cayenne, something to add that little bit of, not so much heat, but to make it pop. Okay, I'm also going to add Italian seasonings. Now, you don't have to use the Italian seasoning blend. You can certainly add a little bit of everything you like. You can add the oregano, basil, all of that yourself separately, and rosemary. I love decorating the top of this before I serve it with a sprig of the fresh rosemary. But again, you know, life being what it is, you learn how to use what you have at home and what's on hand. I'm going to cook this down a little bit and be back and show you how I add the last bit of ingredients, including the final vegetables and the liquid that this will all start to cook in. And actually, it'll start to stew in before you put it in the oven. Okay, so it's time to add some additional ingredients here now. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my beef stock. I actually didn't have beef stock already made, and I didn't have any that was already ready to go, so I made this one out of the beef bouillon, or the Better Than Beef bouillon cubes. This is 2 cups. Smells very beefy. Here we go, 2 cups of beef broth. You can see the amount of liquid, and I'll show you a close-up once I do this in a smidge. Get it stirred up. All right. It's starting to smell like a stew already. While this is almost at this phase here, I'm going to get my wine. Now, this will take about a cup to a cup and a half of red wine, any red wine. This happens to be, it happens to be a French wine. I belong to a wine club, and they send me all kinds of wines. Not a big wine drinker anymore, but I'll give it a sample. I use a lot of them for cooking. I think these are around, well, I would not use the cheapest of wines or the kind you buy at the grocery store. I would use something that's like anywhere from $9 to $15 a bottle. You want to use something a little bit nicer to smooth out the flavors in here. That was about a cup or so. I'm going to add a little bit more. This is a completely different type. This may be an experiment in whether or not mixing and matching wines. This one is actually, I'm not sure. It's also from the wine club. It's a nice red. That's about a cup and a half total. Okay, I'm going to stir this up now. Let it kind of cook up. And then I will add the remaining vegetables, which of course, as I said, were a mix of the frozen veggies and then the canned, I know, mushrooms. Okay, so I've got this going now that I've combined the wine with the beef broth and the mix here in the pot. Next thing I'm going to do is add the canned mushrooms. If you were using fresh, you would have added them before this. But let's face it, these are almost waterlogged and they're definitely cooked. But they're still yummy. I especially like that Pennsylvania Dutchman type. It'll be fine, and the flavors in this will absolutely make this perfect. I'm going to add the frozen veggies now because I know that there's water in them. I didn't defrost them or cook them ahead of time. I'm just adding them frozen, which is absolutely fine. And I'm going to add those here now and then stir it all up, and then we'll simmer it for a little bit. So let me get those veggies. I don't think I've ever made this with frozen peas and carrots, but I would have already had the carrots kind of braising with everything else. But this time, we're doing it frozen. And I get a lot of comments, why don't you use fresh this? I do. I prefer the fresh. But sometimes you kind of have it in your mind that you want to make something, and you have a lot of other stuff at home. And really, the more I read about the frozen veggies and frozen berries, they're not like a processed food. They're just frozen. They keep, and you can have them on hand. So I really like using frozen veggies, and I really like having them available. I don't like canned. I'll deal with the mushrooms, but I'm not a canned veggie person. I do like my fresh. All right, and now one more. I do like a lot of vegetables in my stews. And here you go. It's looking really awesome. I'm going to give this a couple of stirs. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like as it simmers before I get it in the oven. But right around now, I will turn this oven on. I'm going to put it on bake. I'm going to set it at 350 and bring it up to temperature. This spends a lot more time in the oven than it does on top of the stove, because that's where the magic happens. That's where this reduces down. That's where the flavors come alive. And that's how you get the meat to practically melt in your mouth when you bite into it. And for the next step, after I give this a really good stir, you can see it's very saucy. It's got a lot of liquid. We are going to take this liquid and cook it all down. We especially want to take our time with this because we want the meat to be as tender as absolutely possible. So I'm going to lower this to the lowest setting, and I'm going to cover it and kind of let it go for a little bit. Then come back, check it, give it a stir. Hopefully it's more concentrated and we've melted down. But sometimes during this phase it actually lets more out before it gets to the point where it starts to really get thick and caramelized. But that's what the oven is for. Back in a flash. So let's see how this looks. It's been covered. I kind of wanted to bring it up to temp because I had added those cold ingredients, those frozen veggies and things. Getting hot. And now we don't need the cover anymore. In fact, we want the juices to start evaporating and really condensing down the amount of liquid in here. It looks amazing. But it's not done yet. Smells amazing too. It's at that magic moment where all the different seasonings and all the different foods have kind of blended together already, and it's just starting to blossom, and you can see and almost smell and kind of anticipate the notes that this will all have when it's finally completed. I can smell the rosemary, a little bit of the garlic, definitely winey. It has that umami wine base that makes it so earthy and delicious and gives it the comforting quality of an outstanding beef stew. Okay, next up, put it in the oven. It's looking great. Oven is just about up at temperature. Give this a couple more stirs, and then it's going to go in the oven, and it will go to the oven for a little bit of time, and we'll keep checking it to see how much reduction we've had of all the liquid, and make sure it gets that nice darkened color that we usually associate with something that's been baking for quite a while. Really getting that meat tender and just intensifying all the flavors of the gravy. And this is really ready to pop in the oven for the last part of the recipe. Like I said, it's going to be in there for a little bit. I'll keep checking it. It's going to go in there uncovered, and we're really just going to let this get very thick and syrupy and concentrated down. I'll show you what it looks like after so much time. I'm going to go about 20 to 30 minutes the first time and then check it again, depending on what it looks like then, every 10 or 15. I'm going to turn this off. My oven is at 350. It's up at temp. One thing you do want to remember to do before you put something like this in the oven, obviously, and I know it should go without saying, make sure your oven racks are ready and before you preheat the oven. I've made that mistake. And this is quite heavy, so you want to make sure that you put it toward the bottom. It's not going to fit in the middle if you have two other racks, for example. So I'm going to open up the oven. I'm going to put this in the oven like this, completely uncovered. Maybe 2 notches up from the bottom of the oven. I'll show you what that looks like. So doing a quick check, it's been about 40 minutes. Wow, look at it get concentrated. I'll show you up close. And beautiful. Not quite. We do want to see it a little bit more. It's at 350. It's uncovered. And let's give it another 20, maybe 30. Okay. Get a better close-up. Too bad the rack's in the way. Oh, that looks nice. There we go. It's been a while. In fact, it's been probably about 2 hours, and I've been checking it every half hour. I've stirred it 2 or 3 times, but come closer to see the beauty of this. Look at what I meant. Wow.
Yeah,
Oh
set
my
that
God.
down.
If you could smell this.
So it was still bubbling.
Let me actually put the spoon in so people can see how the meat, see how thick it is now? It's really soaked in that sauce. It's seared the top. I've stirred it a couple times. Had I used my own chuck, I would have had bigger pieces because I went with stew meat that was already cut. The pieces are smaller and they've certainly become tenderized to the point where this is fork tender.
Looks great.
If it had been made with fresh veggies, it would be bigger pieces of carrot. There is actual fresh onion and fresh celery in here. And yes, I used some frozen veggies. And of course, if I had gone with the fresh mushrooms, this would be beyond amazing. But you know what?
It's going to be good.
This is going to be great.
What are we going with?
Smell the wine.
Mashed potatoes?
Yes, you can either use egg noodles or other type of wide brim pasta.
Rice even?
It could go over rice, absolutely. Anything can go over rice.
Yeah, so pasta, rice, potatoes.
Polenta or mashed potatoes.
Just a preferred starch, and I happen to like the mashed potatoes. So.
And you know what?
And there's no potato in this.
No.
So,
There's no.
would you use a sweet potato side?
I could make sweet mashed if you would prefer that.
No,
I have fresh.
I know you. I think you like the sweet
do like
mash.
sweet.
So why don't
Actually-
we make both?
You know what? We'll have.
Because I like the regular mash, you like the sweet, and I might have a little sweet. So there you go.
So, folks, you can make any base, anything starchy or any potato, rice. You know what? Lately I've been using riced cauliflower for a lot of base.
That stuff's
meals that I
surprisingly good.
Yeah, stuff that I would eat a pasta for, but it's just the fact that the wine, the spices, everything in here is ready to go.
And you used a white or a red? The wine.
Red wine.
It's a red wine. Oh, it's beef. Red wine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, this is just amazing.
I'm going to smell. Oh, yeah. It is. It's nice and steamy and hot. So, this is ready.
This is ready. We're going to have it for dinner tonight. So this is ready.
Well, no, I might have to sample it for lunch.
You'll have to sample
because I'm about to have some lunch.
So, folks, put this over your favorite starch, or even have it plain, maybe with some crusty bread. This is ready to go.
Oh, there you go. I could have a little crusty bread with it. That'll work.
Italian beef stew.
Nice. Looks great to me.
So I want to thank everyone for watching. And if you like the content, if you like our recipes, if you like our travel videos and fishing videos, I'd love for you to subscribe. And in the meantime, thanks for watching. And thanks again. We'll be back with more on Dwayne and Nidia Food, Travel, and Fun.
And a quick toot of my own horn. Got our boat running. We'll be fishing on our boat soon.